And perhaps we're not afraid as much as we are as we get older to really be ourselves. And how that manifested was I loved having fun. I loved using my imagination. I inherently was just true to myself, as most young people are, extremely curious and a little bit different. So very much engaged with music and the arts, sports, arts and crafts, playing in the yard, running the neighborhood till it was dark, things of that nature. So those were kind of I would say kind of the parts that built up my identity as a young person, which led me into my first professional job after college was being a teacher. So I taught for 11 years. I was a middle school chorus teacher the last 8. I taught at DeLong Middle School. And I think that creativity as a young person, being authentic and thinking differently was a big part of me wanting to be a teacher. And so I chose music because music was the place in my life when I was younger that I really, really felt alive. Like I was very much connected to the human experience in high school. I loved choir, and I just loved kind of the magic that happens when you're a part of something musical. And so during this time period of my life, I fell in love with seeing young people grow and change in the classroom. I went through the UW Eau Claire music education program, and it was especially when I shifted from teaching young people, so my first 3 years were teaching elementary music, to teaching middle school people. I like to affectionately call them middle school aliens. I became obsessed with brain-based teaching because I had this question of what is going on with the middle school child? And so I came across Eric Jensen, who's a big author, thought leader in the way of education and brain-based learning, Britt Andriedra, and I just kind of dove headfirst into that love of understanding how the brain works, understanding how to take that information and put it into a classroom where your classes need to be engaging. In that situation, it was so that kids weren't out of control, but also so that they could have a super enriching learning experience. So that was something that mattered a lot to me, and I got to kind of hone in those skills when I was a teacher. So when we think about a teacher brain, I kind of broke this down into how I started to cultivate the identity as a teacher. As a big part of teaching and a big part of education is having empathy for people in your classroom. And having empathy to say, you know, how maybe you're showing up today, even if it's maybe a little bit of outside of like what we would love to see in our classroom, I care for you and you're part of our family regardless of maybe what's going on outside of class. I spent a lot of time getting into curriculum development, thinking about how do we build like full year-long learning experiences for young people that resulted in a change of behavior. And when you think about middle school, I used to tell this story, and I draw a really long line on the board. And this is, I think, Stephen Covey, this is his concept, but I would draw this line on the board and I'd say, okay, if you're 80, let's say imagine that this rope is stretched out in front of us and it's 80 feet long, and each foot of that rope represents a year in your life. And so I draw this, and then I'd like circle a part on the rope, and I would say, these are your teenage years, and a lot of what you do at this time can impact the direction of your rope for the rest of your life. And it wasn't to like make young people feel nervous or anything, but it was to kind of empower them to say, when I am intentional about how I show up and how hard I work and how I interact with people and how I care for other people, how hard I study, I have power to kind of set myself up for success. So I started to think more globally about learning when I got into the music experience at middle school level. We would design concerts that were kind of wrapped around themes, human themes that we'd investigate throughout the year as well. Like I mentioned before, this was a really big part of my identity upgrade in learning about the neuroscience of learning, building connection in the class that was so important, and building that sense of family in your classroom. So these were all of the things that I thought about when I became a teacher, and it was built on a lot of those habits that I had as a young person. So it's kind of this cool symbiotic convergence of identity. Okay, so that was teaching. That's kind of where I sat in that space. at that point, I get this question a lot, like, what brought you into going from being a public school teacher in the music classroom to working in a corporate environment? And so just for context, so after teaching for 11 years, I shifted into working in software. And so I worked across the river here at Jamf Software for 5 years, and I was a training and development manager. And it was really kind of the first one that the company had, so there wasn't another person for me to really emulate. It was a lot of, exploring how this role looks, and I had an amazing manager who was very thoughtful in how we kind of built out this role and how it contributed to the goals of the business. And so my responsibility was to, at first, develop a kind of an onboarding process for new hires after they came into like our all company summit. So I'm new to Jamf, I'm gonna come in, we're gonna hang out for a week in Minneapolis, and then the product side of the company, or about, at that time, it was like half of the company, we wanted to go to kind of the next part of the funnel, going down a little bit more specific to their role, into a training that I built called Bridge Training. And so I got to sit in that space of developing curriculum. I got to sit in that space of like thinking about learning and how we create an environment that is really impactful. And the first most incredible aha moment I had when I went into the corporate setting was, well, there was many. One was like, I don't know anything about technology, software. This is going to be a wildly interesting learning journey for myself. But it was also that adults need incredible learning experiences too. And when you provide them and you build out that container for them, they get to grow and develop just like young people do. And what a cool opportunity to be able to bring that opportunity for adults to learn and grow as people into a corporate setting. And so I was hired in at Jamf, and I guess just to like backtrack the story a little bit, I had just completed my master's degree in education leadership. My line in grad school was, I want a job in education that just doesn't exist yet. So this was kind of that at Jamf, and this is where I really thought I'd spend the rest of my career. I loved building out learning experiences for employees here. I still love the company. It's an incredible workplace. And I really brought in creativity and thinking differently and nurturing the growth of others, and brain-based learning and student engagement was still a really big part of the mindset and identity that I went into this business in. So I'm gonna pause here. Any questions so far about this journey? Let me just keep rolling. Okay. Now, what I also discovered in the corporate learning environment is that we have so many smart people who are helping other people learn. And so I noticed that if somebody maybe wasn't an official trainer, but they were responsible for training other people, I realized that there was this gap. And the gap wasn't that they weren't smart. The gap was that they knew their content really, really well, but they didn't understand how people learn. And so they would put on these incredible trainings and talk about all this tech stuff, and it was really a lot of information for people. And so sometimes, and this is not common, like this is kind of a universal theme that can be present in corporate settings, is that trainers act like presenters, like I'm doing right now, where I'm just talking at you, and they're not necessarily being teachers. And being a teacher is a completely different mindset in how you, the responsibility of a teacher is on how much you learned as a learner, and the responsibility of a presenter is just on what they say. And so there's this shift of like, okay, if you two are sitting in my classroom and I want you to walk away with certain learning experiences, I have to give you activities that allow you to explore the content, talk about it, see how it fits in with your own life, and understand if what we're talking about and what we're exploring together is something that actually can be actionable for you outside of the talk for us. So that was just kind of I don't want to get too deep into the neuroscience of learning, but that was a huge shift that I saw. Like the legacy way of teaching, I'm going to sit up and talk at you for 45 minutes, and then I wonder why people don't understand how to do it on their computers, was because they were presenting, not teaching. So at that time, I got a chance to bring in a lot of the neuroscience of learning, make trainings really engaging. It was so cool because we used to call these sneaky goals in my former job, but I always had the goal of helping people learn more about themselves in the context of like a business training. So it's really, I would call it kind of personal development disguised as professional development. And so that's where I landed at Jamf and got some opportunities to do a lot of really cool projects. At that time, I would say the part of who I was and related to kind of my professional identity, this is where I really learned about the corporate setting. So systems, processes, how you need to be strategic, the short game versus the long game, understanding what I would just say are corporate basics. I got inundated with that, obviously in a really beautiful way. Understanding business jargon, words that are specific, what's a sprint, what are, just understanding that environment so that when I started building learning programs, it was a connecting point into all of those systems. And the last thing that was striking but not surprising is that when we would put on learning programs, you're just reminded that people are just people. And adults still need to be supported when they're learning. People still need to be able to ask questions and maybe don't love that. There's like vulnerability and all these different components to providing a safe space of learning. And so we need to remember that adults are adults and they're humans. So this is kind of where I landed. And it was at this point that where you can see like so much of my professional career had been this like you develop a mindset, this like somewhat is like an identity based on these mindset pieces, and it was very additive, right? Everything kind of added up to be great. I because of this, I was able to be a good teacher. Because of being a good teacher, I could be a good training and development manager. And so I would say that with the exception of not knowing anything about software and being brand new to the corporate space, there was some learning, but a lot of it was like kind of in my zone of excellence, where I'm pretty good at being able to develop these cool learning experiences. And I loved it. So there came a point where I was probably year 4 working in software, and I had this kind of constant nudge inside of my head that was about having a bigger impact in the way that I help people understand how people learn. So to say that another way would be like, I just really care about people experiencing really good learning experiences because it can fundamentally change you and it can make you so much better at your job and have more autonomy. And when we grow and we learn, that feels really good. And it's that motivating aspect of learning. So for some reason, I just really care a lot about learning and I care a lot about brain-based learning science. And there was always kind of this undertone of like, okay, so what do you want to do with this? Even though I loved my job in software, I had this kind of presence inside of me that said, you're going to be doing something different, you just don't know it yet. It was the same, have you ever had that? I want to talk about that. Where when I was teaching and I went to grad school, I was like, I want a job in education, it just doesn't exist yet. And so I think I've always been very intuitive to that voice inside of my head. And when I think about that, it makes me want to, I guess, say out loud, like, sometimes to hear that voice, we just have to get quiet enough and still enough. And I think, like, being a mom and, someone who's highly ambitious, I would kind of hear that whisper, but I would never really stop and listen to it. And so this isn't my language, but there's a woman that I follow, and on one of her podcasts, she had someone on that talked about nudges and rhinos. And so I had these little nudges of like, maybe you want to do something by the way of brain-based learning, engaging learning experiences. And so kind of the next piece that came up for me was when I'd have people ask if I could consult for their business. And they'd say, we have a training team. They know the content. They're like experts. They're engineers. They're really good. And they're like, but people are not getting, the trainings are falling really flat. Also, as an aside, when people ask me what I do with Learn Better, which I guess I didn't really explain that, we build learning experiences for other businesses, and we help training teams understand the science of learning, so their trainings are incredible. When I talk about what Learn Better does, people are always kind of like, training. And that's the exact point, because typically it's not great. right? It's like unengaging. And really what that means is it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money. And so when you have things that are a waste of time, and a waste of money, that can be really frustrating for so many people, right? My point is, like, when people would kind of chuckle under their breath about how trainings can be typically not great, that was the whole genesis of the company. So the second nudge was, do you consult? Would you be willing to talk to my training team, perhaps help them understand how people learn so their trainings are a lot more effective? Then I got the idea of, okay, I think I'm going to build a training series, a video series on how to build trainings from scratch using the neuroscience of learning as kind of the core research and foundation of how we want people to build with the brain in mind. So for fun, I decided to build a 13 video series that was like a 6 to 8 minute video on building a training from scratch. And the content was incredible and the production level was like really bad. So, but I built this business and this video series, and I felt like, okay, I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing with this training series, but I'm supposed to do it. And so I guess, like, if I'm trying to be a teacher here, or like offer some advice, is like to think about what are the nudges and the things that you feel, but you don't necessarily know what they mean yet. You won't know what they mean until you get into action with them. And so sometimes I think we wait for like all of these things to be in the right place before we get started. And I've kind of been a believer in let's do it and then see what happens a little bit. So just a little bit of a call out there. So anyway, I'm going to bring all the identity and mindset pieces that we have from all the career experience I had before Learn Better, and all of these pieces together in my brain. I had this video series. I kept thinking, like, what is this really supposed to be for? And so I started coming to the Coven. I've told this story so many times, coming to the Coven. And even though I worked in software across the river, I wanted to work in this environment. So I still did my software work at a desk here. And then I just like found myself in this environment and feeling the energy of entrepreneurs and business builders. And on the weekends, or when my kids were gone at night, I would come in and I was thinking about this course, and I kind of, I had some good mentors in this space. I started to build some consulting services around it. So I'm like, okay, I have this course, maybe a business, because a trainer could take this, or someone in training could take this, and then if they need some help actually building a training, maybe it's like a 2-hour professional development day. Hey, Brent. Then we could have they could purchase office hours or, some type of service to go along with it. You can sit if you want. Okay. So, and I maybe am going to kind of like leave this here as a teaser for Kelly's session, because she's actually going to talk about what Zone of Genius is. It comes from a book called The Big Leap, and really it's the understanding, I'll just kind of give it a little bit of an introduction. It's the understanding that every single person has their own zone of genius that's based on your life experiences, your unique skills, habits, your career path that you've gone down, all of these different components that together allow you to do something that is distinctly unique to you. And if you kind of combine all of those pieces together and you start working in that zone, it's like you're in the state of flow so much easier, and it's where you really thrive because it's your unique contribution of how these things fit together. So to put that into context, what I realized was, excuse me, all of these pieces together formed Learn Better. And so I decided to take that leap and say, okay, I think I have a business here. I want to research the market, talk to a lot of people, but there are people in learning and development that don't know anything about the brain, and I want to change that. So that was kind of the context that led me to starting Learn Better. So I found myself at this crossroads, not to be cliche, but I really did find myself at a crossroad where I was thinking, I could sit in the software company I was working at. I was very excellent at it. It wasn't super challenging, and there were parts of it that like didn't pull on my heartstrings the way that Learn Better did. And again, great company that I came from, but I thought, well, do I want to sit in the familiar space where I know I can be really successful and I can have a steady paycheck and I can have benefits and 401k and all of the things? Or do I want to go into starting my own business and go down this path of being completely green when it came to building a business? Meaning I didn't know anything about how to build a business. I knew what service I could provide companies, but people don't just like line up at your door and say, hi, you're a learning and development company. Will you come and, work with our business? And so I had to make that decision. And there were a lot of factors that went into making that decision, very real financial factors. And the thing that I would like to share, I guess, and offer up is the reason that I was able to make that jump was because I had the support of my partner, who was my fiance at the time, which is very, very, very real support. If I didn't have that, I don't know if fiscally I could have afforded to do this. But the other reason when people ask me, how did you make that leap? And my answer is because I just knew. Like I have this clear vision of how the business can serve other people in the way of learning. Like that's my thing. I mean, we all have our own thing, right? But I just felt so called to help businesses build learning programs for their people. So I decided to become very unfamiliar, but going down the right path. So the very first mindset identity shift I had to make when I founded Learn Better was I had to become a learner. Now this wasn't a big shift for me because I've always enjoyed learning, but really think about when was the last time you had to learn something that was brand new? Like I like to research stuff like in the field that I'm already in, and it's almost like a refinement of knowledge. But to be a learner of something completely new, like what's a business plan? No clue. How do you build your business brand? No idea. What does that even mean? Meant I really, really had to dive into becoming a learner while maintaining the understanding that the business will be there, but you have to be gritty and build it, right? So I found myself consuming a lot of content. The Coven was a great resource for learning business basics. I followed some key podcasters that help people build their business, and constant consumption. But part of that is you can consume information, but then you need to do something with it, right? So it's so easy to be like, I'm going to turn on a podcast because I'm learning here. But then what are you actually doing with that? So one of the themes I figured out early on in this space was like, I need to build in breaks for integration. Meaning, I'm going to sit and consume information. I'm going to learn something that I've never learned before. And then I need to wrestle with it. I need to build it. I need to put planned breaks in my day so that my subconscious could process the information. And I could say, well, how does this actually relate to Learn Better, building the business? So that was a big piece for me. I drank a lot of coffee. I read a lot of books, and I got myself some great mentors. So what was important for me outside of having my husband's support was finding people who were way smarter than me. And surrounding myself with people, this is probably what a lot of you in here already do, but I was very fortunate, again, to work at the Coven and meet some incredible business mentors. Scott Biederman is one. He's become a really good friend. Scott, I'm talking to you, so you can't get mad at me, who has a lot of business experience and just really saw the vision of Learn Better, and it has helped me out. Lots of different people. And then I really had to again, like build relationships. So that whole idea of networking was brand new to me. I was a public school teacher. I worked in tech. We didn't really network. It wasn't, I mean, that just wasn't part of it. So getting in rooms with a lot of people. And I heard the same theme last night when I was at the Muskie Tank Mixer, but there were a lot of people to help, and there continues to be people who help. And so to be able to receive that, sometimes I think my ego would get in the way and be like, well, I'll just figure this out. But to be able to put that down and say, okay, thank you for this help, let's do it. But when you consume too much information and don't do anything with it, then you're just consuming. So building in those pauses. How are we doing on time? Okay. The tool that I thought was the wildest and goofiest and most full of baloney tool that completely shifted the way that I work and build my business is kind of the same concept that people talk about with manifestation and focus. I mean, it goes by a lot of different names. But one of the tools that I learned early when I got into Building Learn Better was to think like a CEO. So I had to make a mindset shift. I am no longer building a business. Yes, I am. But I can't think like I'm just starting this business. I have to operate like a CEO. And so I, again, listened to a lot of thought leaders in this space, and the concept that many of you have probably heard is when you think and use your brain to imagine what a CEO does and how they operate, your brain actually thinks that you're doing that. And so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this research. So where does this research come from? I'm gonna bring Brittany. This is Brittany the Brain. She's my homegirl. She comes with me everywhere. Okay, so the brain. The research that a lot of this tool is rooted in is, there's a couple studies, there's many studies, right? But one of the studies that a lot of people reference is the piano study, where there were two groups, a control group that were learning to play the piano, and then the other ones were only allowed to listen to a piano lesson, but weren't actually allowed to physically play. So, like the control group, they'd have their lesson, they were taught, how to do these different things. And the variable group, they were listening and imagining in their brain themselves playing piano. Without getting into like the nitty gritty of the research, because I'm going to botch that anyways, the biggest takeaway was that they had the same amount of brain engagement and the same amount of brain growth between both groups. Meaning, when people practice it in their brains, they had nearly the identical level of brain engagement and skill development as people who didn't, who physically played. So if you think about athletes, do you wonder why, like if you watch a football game, do you wonder why they watch the iPad right after a play? It's because they need to like see it in their brains and imagine it. And like athletes are constantly running like before games, so like 2 hours of practice in their brains, different plays, different strategies. It's a very common thing because, so this kind of goes back to the tool of your brain doesn't know the difference between real life and imagination or thinking. And so when we go back to this tool, when I would start to do this like nightly practice where I would think about, okay, my day tomorrow, I'm not going to think just like a business person. I'm going to think like a CEO. There's a little bit of a paradox because I'm like, how do I know what a CEO thinks and does, But I just like, it forces you to kind of like think deeper in that way. And I would walk through my day thinking about how a CEO would walk through it, mentally practicing that day. And then the next day I would maybe do about 50% of what I practiced because the brain had done it before, the night before. So this is just kind of a tool that I started. It's a mindset habit thing of like how you think about your role, the actions you do out of that are in alignment with your mindset there. So I needed to stop thinking like just a business builder, someone who doesn't know what the heck they're doing, to I'm a CEO of my business. So during this time, I know I'm talking mostly about like mindset and identity stuff. I do want to share a couple things that I learned very early on as a founder of a business. The first advice I got, I don't remember where it was, was don't build your business with blinders on. And so I want to explain this a little bit because it's opened up a really big revenue stream for my business. I built Learn Better to help training teams understand the neuroscience of learning. What happened early in the business is some of my now clients said, we don't have a training team. Will you come in and use your Learn Better process, this process that I was going to teach people how to do it? They said, will you come in and use that and build us a learning program? And so I'm like, absolutely. It's kind of get to drink my own champagne. I have this great process. I had to learn how to build trainings for things I didn't know anything about in tech. So that was kind of the refinement of that whole process. And so what happened there is I started to realize that businesses, there is a gap with, in the same way that trainers don't always understand how the human brain builds and develops knowledge, managers who are promoted because they're very good at their job don't always know how to lead people. So what ended up happening is I built some learning and development programs for a couple of businesses, their leadership development program for their employees. And that became a service that is the most profitable in my business. So had I said, I'm only doing learning and development, I'm only talking to trainers or people who do learning, I would have missed out. And it brings me so much joy. Again, when you think back to like my zone of genius here, I get to, when I build these programs for people, I'm using my imagination, I'm building curriculum, I'm looking at like developing engaging strategies so that when we have class, the people are just immersed in the learning, and that, in the same way, you have to use it for it to be meaningful. So if they were in a class, and we talk about learning a lot in these classes, but if they were in a class, the goal is to put them in this container, kind of like an incubator. A lot of ideas we're going to swirl around, talk about some strategies, some tools. We're reading some books. But a big part of it is identifying your skills and practicing them, and for them to consider what out of all of this information helps me become a better leader, because it will be wildly different from person to person. So anyway, when I go back to this slide, I knew like one of the services early on was building a custom training, but it was refined throughout kind of the audience or whatever your customers are telling you that helps you to determine what to put in your business. So that was one thing I learned that was incredibly impactful. The second thing was that, and I'm still a year and some change into my business, things just take time. So for example, my sales cycle for a typical client is 12 months, meaning I have to work that relationship for 12 months if they're going to invest in this type of a program. And I've had a couple close much quicker than that, and some that were like still dancing together and working out what that engagement will look like. So something that's really helped me in that way is to be patient, because if you try to force these engagements with companies, it doesn't work. And you might land that client, but then if it's a little bit out of alignment with what your zone of genius is or how you can really serve them in the best way possible, it becomes such an energy depletion, or like they're not getting what they should from that type of an engagement. So I have to remind myself over and over to be patient, and I still very clearly see the vision of Learn Better, but I have to be aware of like not forcing it and kind of trusting that that process will happen in the way that it's supposed to. Do you guys struggle with that? Mm-hmm. It's tricky. Yeah. The next mindset shift I had is to be a multiple hat wearer. This is a cliche. All small business owners are hat wearers. All the hats. And so very quickly in my time of building Learn Better, I realized what I'm really good at. I can knock a service out of the park, and I can create huge impact on other companies and their employees. But the road to getting those clients are building out a website and having your brand and your mission and building out your values and who you are as a business and networking and all those different components. And so I think what happened was when I started wearing all these different hats, I realized what hats that I put, when I put them on, were like falling apart. And so that was an indicator to me, like, okay, if I have a space in my business that I have to do it because it's a rite of passage as a founder. I need to be able to identify what areas I'm not good in and ask for help. Now, the reason I wanted to draw this out is because so many times especially at the beginning, and I find myself doing this all the time, I sit in the areas that are really comfortable and fun, but they're not, we were talking about this, they're not necessarily the ones that I should be focusing on to move my business forward, right? So just because I really enjoyed building curriculum, like I have to create a personality and a persona for this particular service and make sure people really understand that. So being strategic to help and really understanding kind of what are you good at and what are you not good at. And those things become very apparent when you start your business, right? So the next piece that I am starting to step into in different ways is to become a leader. And I want to be really honest about this transition for me because I sat in the space of I think I'm building a business. Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be a learner. I'm gonna try to integrate. I'm gonna build this business. And then the business got to a point where I'm becoming my own bottleneck. I am the one meaning if something needs to go through me and I'm responsible for everything, if I can't do it, then that thing doesn't get done. And I had this big fear. I've talked about this last week in the women's pre-conference. I had to really understand why I'm having trouble with the idea of hiring people. And I had a lot of these limiting beliefs that were really rooted in a couple things. The first one was thinking that I was the only one that could do my job, which there's some things that I am the only one that I can do, right, at this point. But it's such a foolish, short-sighted vision because, first of all, I'm in training and development, so I should be able to train anybody to do anything. But I had to, really the undercurrent of that was control. I want to be able to control everything. And then thinking, just these fears were popping up about like, well, then do I need to spend all this time like helping this person figure it out, but I'm still building the business. And that was kind of a scarcity mindset with time, thinking that everything had to kind of, if I had this, it would be a depletion over here instead of being additive. And so I think things happen for a reason. People come into your life for a reason. And I met my brilliant employee who's here today, named Katrina. Hi. And I got to know her, and it was something where, and I'm curious if all of you feel this way, I felt like I know she's brilliant at her skills, but she's like a learn better person. She's like a learn better personality. And I didn't even know that was a thing. I'm sorry if you're offended and you're like, I'm my own self, but I knew that she had the same values and the kind of spirit of wanting to see people grow through learning and wanting to be part of this mission, but brought a completely different skill set than I had. And so when I overcame some of these limiting beliefs about hiring and that whole thing, I have found so much joy in my short time of having Katrina here, getting to empower her to do her own thing too. I'm gonna support you in all the ways, and I want you to be in your zone of genius. And I've had so many people in the last few weeks be like, gosh, what's going on with your marketing? What's going on with it looks so good. And I'm like, well, that's because I hired someone to do it. But as another example of this, Katrina came to me 6 months ago with a program idea that we could collaborate on between the Coven, Vivid and Learn Better, and together we co-birthed a program called Leader She, and she really kept me on track. And it was like, this would not, I told her this a couple of days ago, this program would not be here without her, period. And so I have found so much joy in just this short stint of being a leader of my team, but that 3 months ago was not where I was at. I was very nervous. I was like, this is going to be a nightmare. I don't know. I can't even, she knows me. I don't even know where my car keys are right now. So how am I going to keep track of a team? But when you hire the right people and empower them and have systems and processes, then they get to expand the impact of what you're doing together. So really where I'm sitting today, and I'm going to kind of wrap things up here, is I want to still have the vision and be the visionary of the business, but I want to continue scaling Learn Better in the way that we're building systems, but we're not growing too fast that we can't take things on. So I've been going kind of a little bit slow on the growth journey, to be honest, as far as like, there are probably a lot that is coming in that we're just being really focused on serving our customers right now. But I would say like the mindset shift over the last 6 months, I am currently in the place where I know that 1 + 1 = 15 instead of 2. And we're going to get really good at us too. And then we'll see like if there's another part of the team, or we'll kind of see how this grows. But it's been really a big shift for me in a way that's unlocked a lot of impact in the business too. So the last thing I'll say is this, and then I would love to like get some feedback and insight from all of you. I went to the Women's Business Conference yesterday, chatted with your wife. She was so lovely. And a year ago, I had just started Learn Better. And I remember like last year at the Women's Business Conference being like, this is what I do. Do I have any paying customers yet? Nope. Do I have like a viable product? I mean, I think so. But to have that reflection point yesterday to say, wow, how incredible has this last year been? And I think my point in bringing this all up is because I think if I would have stayed really tight with my mindset and really limited my thinking, a lot of this stuff would have been blocked. A lot of it would have been like shut down because I needed to control, or I would have rushed clients and it would have fallen apart. And so I have plenty that I've done wrong and I would do differently, but I do think staying curious and seeing your long-term vision, but getting into action and then also kind of like letting things happen naturally has been really serving my business in a really good way. So I guess I wanted to share a couple takeaways for you that I think about often. My comfort zone, I love it. So good. But it's where like we produce the same. And so there's nothing wrong if that same is really good, but the amount of unknown that you can handle is directly related to how much your business can grow. It takes courage to step into the unknown. I'm very brave. It doesn't mean I'm not afraid, but I'm very brave. So the courage sometimes to say, I'm going to make this decision. Courage doesn't mean you don't have fear. It just means you are going to do the leap anyways. I guess I just said this, but like in that unknown space is where, as hard as it can be, is where you get the expansion. And so I reflect often on like times where it's almost like you feel like you're swimming with alligators. Don't recommend it, right? But then like I come out of an experience and I'm like, okay, the next time I'm going into this, I'm like stronger in this way. My mindset is I am more comfortable doing hard things than I've ever been before. The next one is my biggest breakthrough. This is kind of a theme of life I've talked about several times too, is right on the other side of my limiting belief was my biggest breakthrough. The most recent example of that has been hiring. That has been the biggest breakthrough for my business. And it was the thing I was afraid of the most. The last few you can kind of read through. See the vision, but focus on today and a few steps ahead. Bet on yourself. That was the one thing I said. Like, I know myself. I will always bet on myself because I know I will follow through and make this come to life. And make sure that you are using like what our imagination can bring us. Be curious. Imagine things that don't exist yet. That's really where you can find a lot of joy. And make sure to have fun. There's a period in like the middle of Learn Better where I'm like, am I having fun right now? This isn't really fun. So sometimes it's like to take a step back and be like, oh yeah, I'm in control of my day. I can plan my day. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do these things. That's kind of the benefit of being an entrepreneur. So with that being said, I would love to hear some of your thoughts, insights, takeaways, questions. Please follow us on the socials. A lot of you already do. We have a new Instagram page. Our old one we're locked out of. I made it dual authenticated to my Jamf email like 4 years ago. No, that couldn't be real. My old Jamf phone, when I started the LLC, when I was like a month of changing phones. Anyway, I'm locked out. So stay in touch. And what questions do you have, or curiosities, or takeaways, or where are you at? What do you guys think about? What's going on in your brains?
So I did an exercise maybe a year or two ago with someone I was working with who's kind of like a visual coach. And she had me think about 10 years in the future. And instead of just saying like milestones, you had to write like a day in my life.
Interesting.
So like, where are you? What are you doing? Who are you interacting with? What's the same? What's different? What does it look like? Who are you with? And so I did that exercise, and I think about that day that I wrote about often, because it relates to the vision that I'm trying to grow into. And it ends up being very helpful to say, okay, I can see where this is going. And this is, because I wrote a day that was like something that felt really exciting and successful to me.
Yeah. That's a great activity. Ties into the, even like then your brain is aligning your actions to be.
Yeah. And so it's a good reminder for me when I get caught in the weeds. So, because it can be, I'm in, trying to do a pivot, essentially, to where I see that I am in my zone of genius. And
Cool.
It's a hard thing to do, because I've been making my money this way for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I still have to like make money to, eat and have a house and stuff.
Right.
So it's a challenge. For sure. But I think having that vision helps.
I think it's probably, in my mind, I feel like it's one of the most underrated concepts, or maybe not. Maybe people do see the huge value in it, but it's like when you see that vision, and it's truly a vision, it doesn't go away. And it's just, I see like this building over and over, and I've had that intuitive hit since before I started the company. So it's cool to kind of, take a step back and loop back to that, because that exists in the future somewhere. Who's to say it doesn't?
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I want to hear more about that too. Any other insight, friends? Questions?
If someone was dealing with a block, like they were their own block, what is a piece of advice you would give to them? And this person may not necessarily know what that block is. What are their first steps?
Yeah, so her question was, if people are dealing with a block, how would you kind of handle that, and what would be their first steps? I think of that in two ways. Number one, about 90% of our behavior operates in our subconscious. So we're not actively thinking about all of these different things we're doing. And so what comes up for me there is a lot of what is probably blocking us, we aren't even aware or thinking about it. And so that's why I really love research. So people who literally study like human behavior or certain skills, it gives you a mirror into both your conscious action and your subconscious to be like, okay, I know more about, emotional intelligence. I kind of do this thing without even thinking about it. So it's bringing some of those things that could be blocking us into consciousness first, and then saying, okay, I have this thing that I do that isn't serving me anymore. Maybe I want to do something different, and looking at like replacement behaviors and practicing and being intentional with that. So as far as maybe like a subconscious thought, I think it's like, I do believe in like reading and listening to podcasts and then seeing what comes up for you. And again, taking that time to be still. Like I really believe in like getting quiet enough to hear whatever is supposed to be coming to your brain. And then with like conscious thoughts or blockers, I think it's like there's this element. So I'll use the example of like the blocker of hiring is going to be really challenging. There's a book that that I've read several times. It's the concept in systems thinking. So it's really asking why, and why there's like 5 levels of why. So why do you feel that way? Well, because I think it's going to be more work, and I don't want to let that person down. And is it just adding to my plate? Okay, well, why do you think that? Well, because of this. And eventually you kind of drill down and get into maybe an underlying belief that you have, where for me it could be like that underlying belief, limiting belief is like, I need to control everything. All right, so then I start hearing this thing over and over again, like my need to control everything, and starting to practice ways that I'm not doing that. And so I've heard it being called like microdosing a behavior, like start to release control and start to tell your nervous system that that's okay to release that, because your body is still going to probably hold on really tightly. So I have this limiting belief, I have this blocker. I'm going to kind of practice doing things right on the other side of it. The other camp of thought is like do the exact thing that you're afraid to do and see what comes up, because that might be really insightful for you too. So if I'm afraid to put myself out there on social media, I don't like it, then just do it. Like practice it and then see what comes up. Like, is it really that bad? Or someone's going to say something awful about me. Okay, maybe they did. So okay. Yep, how did that go? We're going to practice like digesting that hard thing. And maybe your unlock on the other side is, oh, it kind of bothers me, but not as bad as I thought. Or it wasn't as hard as I thought. Yes, friend.
My neuroscience coaching instructor talked about we typically will work in an order of feeling, thinking, doing.
Mm-hmm.
And he said sometimes you need to flip that script and have your doing inform your thinking, so that your thinking can then inform your feeling.
Is that Thayer?
What?
Is that the Thayer research? Thinking, being, doing?
I'd have to go back.
Okay. Just curious.
But I remember that flipping and making sure that, because sometimes, it's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not something you want to do, but you can get to a point where it's in that zone of excellence. You can work there for a while until you can get someone else to replace that zone of excellence, so you can revert back to your zone of genius.
Yeah.
So going back to Hendricks again.
And the doing part, it prevents you from maybe having this emotional block of, I just don't want to do this or whatnot, and kind of retraining your brain to say, like, I'm going to get into action first. It might not it might not feel great. And then maybe at the end of it, it's like, it is like you maybe even have a different emotional response to it or something like that. So that's very cool.
I wanted to share one other insight.
Yes,
because you
please.
had said something that dawned on me or inspired me. You said, this wasn't fun. Why am I not having fun?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've realized is, this is now my second business, and I've worked with other businesses before as well. There are certain stages that that are more enjoyable.
Right. Yeah.
So the serial entrepreneur often loves that starting phase.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're starting from scratch. We're going to build something. We're just like, there we go. But there's other entrepreneurs, like, I don't like that stage. In fact, I'm just starting to pull out of that stage and into a stage that I'm pretty excited about, where I do have a team of people.
Yep.
And I am deploying them, and they're doing, and I realized, wow, I'm having more fun
Yeah.
right now than I have in the prior 3 years.
Yeah. It's like the delayed gratification, right? It's like, I'm going to get through all of this early stuff knowing it's necessary, and then I can be in that zone. And typically fun is like also your zone of genius. You typically have fun in your zone of genius. And so you're not going to be a genius in your zone of genius in every aspect of building your business. It's true. Thank you for that insight. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts, insights, questions?
What's a theme that maybe I've heard this week and recently as I look to relaunch a business
Mm-hmm.
that I had before. I had 2 business partners previously, so now it's just on me. And one of the message I heard last night that I heard today, the message last night was be comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Correct.
And then you just, unfamiliar but right is the way you had it
Yep.
worded.
Yep.
And it's just a mindset that you need to take that
It is. I mean, there's no secret sauce to everything, but I would say if there were, it is that. It is the more capacity you have to handle the unknown and discomfort, the more you're able to, that's like proportional to how you can grow and build your business. And if you're not wanting to, you dip a toe in and you come back out, you're going to probably stall out or go slowly, or it's not going to work. And the cool part, which we usually don't, it's a hindsight perspective, is you can also find like the most expansion in that way. Like, I'm uncomfortable, but now, holy smokes, I can do that. I can get up in front of an executive team and pitch all day. Like, that's fine. But at the beginning, it's discomfort and it's new. But yeah, usually, I mean, I've heard this said a lot of times too, like, when you find yourself comfortable, that's when you're ready for your next growth period. Which is so obnoxious. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.